Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight, my sidekick, Clay Jones.
Good evening.
And our special guest tonight, a local attorney who has just managed to turn the courthouse upside down. And we'll talk to Lisa Andrews about her big adventures with drug tests in a few minutes. A couple of quick news stories before we start. Republican vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan made a few waves in Colorado, where at a meeting he said that he thought the federal government should let alone those states that have medical marijuana laws. He then went ahead and said he personally did not believe in medical marijuana. Even on the surface, his statement is somewhat weaker than the statement Attorney General Holder made, and we see what a mess that's created in California. So I don't think that I see much range or promise in this statement other than that it indicates an overall increase in detente in the political process overall, that it's come out of the closet and it's something a politician
He's not going to fight
mention.
for what he doesn't believe in.
Yeah. That's, I think, the main thing that's going on right now. Of course, we do have the 3 referenda coming up in November in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington to legalize, and I put that word in quotes, marijuana on the state level.
And they just took North Dakota off the referendums for medical marijuana, that they said the college kids that were getting the signatures just got too many of them. I guess they couldn't be all verified, so
okay.
It's no longer going to be voted on North.
Yeah, but apparently,
Missouri,
medical marijuana definitely is on the ballot in Arkansas.
It's in Arkansas, Missouri. It's Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, it's been pending in their legislature the whole year.
Yes.
They have yet to act.
Right.
But you were saying that
come November, they have to put it on the ballot.
In some districts in Massachusetts, they have decided to put a non-binding opinion poll on it on the ballot.
Yes, they're going to ask people if they think the federal marijuana laws should be repealed.
And also in some districts about whether the state should allow medical marijuana.
Right.
But it's not statewide, and it's strictly a non-binding opinion.
Yeah, and there's some on the east side and some on the west side of the state.
Yeah. Well, some of you may have noticed in the Houston Chronicle over the past 2 weeks a series of articles that leapt from the local section to 3 successive days on the front page, and then 2 massive follow-ups this week having to do with the embarrassingly awful mess in the Harris County probation offices on drug testing. We are happy to have with us tonight Lisa Andrews, who is the attorney that brought this to the court's attention and caused really what looks like some major changes in the way things may be done here in Harris County. So, Lisa, we're glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
And before we really get started, I want to remind everyone that this is your show. We'll have the phone number on the screen. You can call us with your comment or question if you're watching us live. If you're watching us on YouTube, or if you look at the tapes from the website later, of course, there's no one here to answer a phone call, but you can email me at the address shown. I'll get an answer back to you quickly, and we may use your question or comment on the next show. So, Lisa, tell us first, what did you accomplish in court with your motion to suppress some drug tests?
Well, what long-ranging things that I've accomplished are yet to be determined.
Right.
But in the short term, my client's probation was not revoked.
That was the key goal. Yes.
That was the key. The judge denied the state's motion to revoke his probation.
Yeah.
She also issued some very unusual rulings from the bench, which just reflected her opinion about the evidence that she heard, which was these administrators need to be fired, and she was no longer going to allow UA test results in her court because she found that they were unreliable.
Well, frankly, I'll tell you this, after nearly a half a century in the law, when I read about both her comments and her actions toward future drug tests, my jaw dropped. That was just really unheard of.
It is. But the evidence was pretty astounding. It was very overwhelming and well documented.
Yeah. It made a brief mention of your spending a few late nights, but having been there, I know that there's more to it than that.
Well, there was definitely a lot of late nights.
Yeah.
The probation department complied with all my subpoenas and provided thousands and thousands and thousands of documents and emails related to the problems that they had had with UA testing. So there was a lot to read and go through.
Yeah. Well, after the judge said she was no longer going to accept urine analyses from the probation office, a couple of other things happened on the political side with the probation office and its urine testing. What were those?
Well, Paul Becker, who was the director of the probation department, he resigned.
Yes.
Along with two of his deputy directors. One still there.
Yes.
I believe they were all retirement eligible at the time.
Probably, yeah.
But the one who did not resign is not, I'm told, and so he is still there.
Yeah. And what did the district attorney's office do?
The district attorney's office issued a moratorium on relying on any UA testing in any motions to adjudicate or motions to revoke probation or any other capacity with which they may rely on those in court until they could determine what needs to be done and until the system gets fixed.
Yeah. Well, now, as I understand it administratively, the probation department is actually, even though it's paid for and staffed by the county, it's actually a branch of the state government. And as I understand it, the state has said they're going to step in and investigate this.
I think that the probation department actually receives a lot of state money.
Yeah.
Also, even maybe more so than county money. It's kind of a
it's one of
different
those weird
hodgepodge.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the state has said that they were going to step in. It's a group called CJAD is the acronym. And they came in briefly for a day or two, I believe, to look into some of the allegations.
Yeah.
However, I haven't heard any more from them.
I suspect it's going to take a few weeks at least for them to even really get started.
Well, I hope they do get started.
Yeah.
I got a foolish question. If they've been sending people to jail on false positives, do these people have any recourse when they lost their homes, jobs, wives? If they can say, I wasn't dirty, and they can say that the test wasn't positive, it was really a negative, do they have any kind of recourse?
I hope so. There may be some 1983 claims.
Yeah, there may be some federal remedies if they can show that this amounted to a deprival of civil rights. I really don't think there's any realistic chance of any kind of recovery through the state court system. But I think first, this is something that I hope most of our viewers don't know anything about. So if you would, could you give us the elevator pitch on what probation is and how the probation system works?
Sure. When you are convicted of various criminal offenses, you can receive a term of probation, community supervision, where you're required to report once or twice a month to a probation officer. You're required to do some community service, maybe pay a fine or restitution, maybe attend some classes depending on what particular crime, and submit to random urinalysis testing.
Okay. Now, when you say random urinalysis testing, how is that done?
Well,
Do they have a bingo wheel that pops out names every week or what?
Not at all. Actually, what I learned about random is that what that means is that it's up to your probation officer individually on what random means.
Okay.
There is very little guidelines about that, so you better hope that you get along with your probation officer because they have tremendous power to decide when and if you will be tested.
Well, that's something I've always kind of wondered about is probation officers seem to have an amazingly large amount of discretion in how they do their job.
They do. They do. And they also have a large caseload to go along with that.
Yes.
So their attention to detail sometimes isn't really there just because of their workload.
Well, with all of these visits to the probation office, with the random drug test, with having to attend classes, who pays for all of these things?
In theory, the probation.
In theory,
the probationer does. However, I think many probationers struggle because there's so many fines and fees, days off work every time you have to go in, and it sometimes is a big struggle for them to keep up with all of the different requirements.
Yeah, and it's frankly, in many cases, hard for someone on probation to get a job in the first place.
Exactly. So.
I have a friend that 2 years ago he got arrested for DWI, and he was smoking a joint when they stopped him. And he threw the joint out. They didn't find it, but they could smell it. And he told me between his attorney, his bail, the classes, everything he had to do, it cost him almost $25,000.
I believe that.
That's not at all out of reach,
But that's in 1 year out of your pocket. Not everybody has that extra money.
No, they don't. They definitely don't.
I would hate to try to come up with that amount myself, but and or what happens if they can't pay all of these fees and charges? And
well, again, in theory, we do not have debtors' prisons. So if your only violations are fines or fees, the theory is that you wouldn't go to jail for that. However, you may get your probation extended to pay those things, or they may choose to enforce other technical aspects of your probation, which maybe they wouldn't have done if you weren't behind on fees.
One thing that really caught my attention reading the articles in the paper were the numbers involved. The idea of 300,000 urine tests a year in Harris County that boil down to roughly 100 an hour for every hour the offices are open. That's just an awful lot of pee in a bottle.
A tremendous amount, and even the probation department supplied me with a document where they compared their own statistics to other major counties in Texas, Dallas County, Becker County, and they far exceeded on a monthly basis what other counties were also ordering.
Well, the question there is, did they exceed just in the number of UAs, or are we that much larger in terms of the number of people on probation?
I think that a combination of both. I do think that we are a larger county, but I also think we order a tremendous amount of UAs unnecessarily.
Yeah. Well, there's another part to this, but I want to get to it later in a separate question. But how did you come to the decision that this was something that you needed to look into to represent your client?
I'd had a couple of clients over the last year that have had issues with UAs on either the divert program, that is the program that our district attorney designed for DWI first offenders.
Okay.
It is a zero tolerance type of probation in a sense. So one, your analysis that you fail will get you kicked off of this divert program.
Okay. Now, what happens to someone who gets kicked off of divert or who violates probation? But let's see what our caller has to say. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes. What I'd like to ask, I was called by the probation department today. I am on parole.
Yeah.
I will never outlive my parole. I have
Okay.
another roughly 15 years to go.
Okay.
That I owed $111.50 in court cost. At no time did I or have I ever had a copy of my transcript. My wife and me has both been told that it was burnt in the back of the court reporter's car.
Okay.
So how can they charge me for court fees that they do not have a transcript to say legally what happened and what took place?
Okay. Just thank you for your question, and it's a good one. The transcript is basically a written copy of the words that were spoken during the trial. And the court reporter tapes and makes shorthand notes, probably with a little keyboard thing, and then transcribes them. But the court record itself, which is kept in the clerk's office, includes the original charging documents. With a felony, there would be an indictment, a copy of the plea you entered, a copy of the jury's verdict, a copy of the judge's sentence. These would all be in the court record, and those are still in existence and are still available. Now, if you had appealed your case, the transcript of what happened at the trial would have been important on the appeal. But I'm assuming from what you've said that probably enough time has gone by so that an appeal is not possible, and the court record itself would be what sustains the fact that you were charged, tried, convicted, and sentenced, and that would be enough to establish the court cost. Am I overlooking anything important?
No, I think that was exactly right.
So, yeah, you might like to read the transcript and find out more about what happened to you, but it's not really a part of the legal record of your case. I think the other thing I wanted to get to, he mentioned he was on parole, so that brings something else up. If we look at the people subject to the probation office's jurisdiction now, we have not only people that are on probation or some kind of diversion, but also those being held pretrial who haven't made bond, and parolees, those that have been to prison and served part of their term and are now out under a period of supervision to complete their confinement. Is that kind of a correct view of what's covered by all of these people subject to probation office?
I don't think the parole is covered by probation.
Okay, they may have a separate system for
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes.
Been told it's time that we take a break, so we'll be back and talk with Lisa some more in a minute.
The whole idea of a drug-free America and zero tolerance really doesn't make much sense, does it? So it does make sense, however, to find ways to reduce the harms associated with drugs. And that's what I want to talk about.
To start thinking about whether it is really laws that make the difference on whether people use drugs or not.
Al Capone didn't shoot people because he was intoxicated.
Right, exactly.
Those people are not fighting over drugs, they're fighting over money.
Drug laws have no basis in science. Drug laws are based on politics and money.
So there's this unholy symbiosis between, on the one hand, those who are selling illegal drugs, the drug lords, if you will, and on the other side, the drug warriors.
War on drugs isn't working, and that, if anything, it's just making what we call the drug problem a lot worse.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
If you're absolutely sick of being mistreated and you're tired of being blamed for what your society wrong, support Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
All right, so we're back with Lisa Andrews, the lawyer that brought to the courts and the public's attention the mess in the probation office, your analysis. And we were talking about how you got on the track of finding this problem and why you decided that it needed to go to the court.
I'd had my suspicions about a lot of the different errors that were occurring because of previous clients that I've represented who have insisted that they were not positive, did not use drugs, and upon further investigation, you find out they're telling you the truth. And each and every time I had that kind of client, I found a different problem that was occurring at probation. So when I had a client who had...
Let me interrupt here with one thing. And by the time the client got to your office, I'm sure there would have been days at least, if not weeks, since that drug test had taken place. So there was no way to get an independent sample at that stage because the system would have been flushed long before that.
Sometimes, but other occasions we did send them for independent testing. So it was kind of a perfect storm of events, things I knew about, things other lawyers had told me about, that when I got a client who had a motion just based on positive UAs, I decided to look into it a little deeper.
Okay, and to look into it deeper, I think you said that you subpoenaed records from the probation department, and what did you get when you subpoenaed the records?
I at first subpoenaed basic things like their policies and procedures, training manuals, training of different personnel and employees, and then started subpoenaing more and more documents related to problems in certain regions, And it just, every time I got a stack of documents responsive, I found new and different problems that would cause me to draft more and more subpoenas until I was looking at thousands and thousands of documents.
Now, most of us grew up looking at TV and watching Perry Mason and Matlock, and I guess today it would be Boston Legal or The Good Wife. But in real life, lawyers spend a whole lot more time late at night propping their eyelids open and pouring through very, very boring documents than they do in the courtroom.
There's no question about that.
Yeah. Well, as your evidence started accumulating, and I think one thing that I questioned as I was following this in the newspaper, did this look like simply a case of a system that was underprepared and overwhelmed with people without the time and the resources to do a good job? Or was there something more to it than just being buried under a mass too big to dig out of?
I wish that it were that simple, but no. There were good, smart people in the probation department who were telling the administration for years in emails, memos, meetings, this is a problem. We have to fix this. And they repeatedly would tell the administration about different problems. And their response was to marginalize that employee, demote that employee, move that employee to another department, uninvite that employee to the meetings where these things were discussed. And it was definitely a culture of, we don't want you talking about this, don't tell the judges about this, and don't talk about this beyond our office. They went to great lengths to, I'm going to call it cover up, and change their records.
That sounds like what you're describing.
It was. For example, everyone, I'm sure, read in the paper about one of my witnesses, who's a man named Richard Yost. He was on a DWI probation. They said he tested positive for cocaine. Turned out that was a mistake. It was switched with someone else's sample. I subpoenaed a copy of his probation file on August the 9th. They changed his file on August the 13th.
Okay, really?
Right.
To change it from a positive to a negative?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
they were going to let it stand incorrectly. And then once I requested that, then they went ahead and changed it.
Okay.
So,
and that, I hope, influenced the outcome of his case, did it?
well, the problem is his case was over.
Oh, okay.
He had already been sentenced to 30 days in the Harris County jail. Protesting his innocence all the way. Yeah.
Well, something that, and I guess this is too much my living in the ivory tower instead of actually getting down in the dirt in the courthouse to fight it out. I was surprised at how lax their procedures for maintaining a trail of custody or even identification of the samples was through the process. It seems like they just didn't have a system.
It was basically no system because of those things that you just pointed out. Their policies and procedures, very poorly written, and even the things that were written were not followed in any way, shape, or form. There exists today no chain of custody. There is no way that the district attorney's office can prove up a chain of custody on any UA that is done in the county.
Okay, and once again, just to fill in a little background here, the chain of custody is the concept that when any physical thing is going to be evidence in a trial, there must be a positive showing by the state of where that thing was, who had custody to it, and that nothing has happened to alter it from the time it was originally found or created until the time it's introduced into evidence. And if the police or the agents make a slip up and make a break in that chain of positive custody anywhere, then the court will probably exclude that and not let it come into evidence. And you're telling me that probably no or very few urine samples are tested, those samples?
I'm saying none.
None.
In fact, one of their senior employees who had told the department about these problems for years testified that their chain of custody had more holes than Swiss cheese.
Okay.
Those were his words.
Yep.
And he also said that no positive UA was truly a positive, that he couldn't say that.
Yeah.
I mean, there were emails documenting labels that were switched on cups.
We have another phone call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, Buford, this is Dean.
Well, hello. I see you've survived at least one hurricane. You've been all over the country, so tell us what's happening on the Caravan now.
Well, today we're in Washington, D.C. We had a march to the White House, a couple of hundred strong, talking about the disappeared and the missing, telling Obama that we're on the march, telling him that it's time to end this drug war.
Okay, let's take about 10 seconds and remind the people what the Caravan is.
Well, it's a group of citizens, Mexican citizens, who have lost their loved ones in the drug war in Mexico, some 60 to 70,000 that they know of that are dead, another 10 or 20,000 that are missing. Seems that the Mexican government doesn't want to compile those figures.
Yeah.
And some say it's well over 100,000 dead.
They probably don't have the ability to compile them.
Well, they don't want to. The fact of the matter is that the cartels, the military, and the police combine forces to commit these killings, these kidnappings, these disappearances. And there's only about a 3% conviction rate on those murders.
Yeah.
And who knows if they're even the right people, considering that low percentage.
Yeah.
It is, every day I cry when I hear these stories, the mothers telling of their loved ones that were taken and disappeared, and how the authorities do nothing to track down those who committed these heinous murders.
Well, let me ask you something, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Is anyone you know of trying to collect the stories these people are telling and planning to compile them into a book to document the whole history of this caravan?
Well, I know there are many journalists. There are press, newspaper journalists. There are video journalists. I hear talk of PBS specials. I know they are compiling these numbers. They are compiling these stories of these families of the victims. And there will be, on your show, in 2 or 4 weeks, I hope to have a lot of information that we can share as well.
That's an hour I really look forward to. Go ahead.
Well, Buford, the one thing that I have done is at every event, we've been to, I'm trying to remember now, it all blurs together, but I think we've been to 27 cities, and in those 27 cities, we've had at least 54 different events where, people from around town gather, they provide food and, want to hear these stories. And the thing is that at every event, I talk to the police, which are always on hand to provide security.
Right.
And other town folk, and I only found one person in America who wants this drug war to continue. Because you give them 90 seconds of my spiel, if you will, and they realize there is no legitimacy to this, and they're saying, yes, we must end it.
Yeah.
The only one that I found who wants it to continue was a hot dog vendor in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay.
Who has neighbors who grow pot and smoke pot, and the smoke and the smell irritates him so much that he wants the drug war to continue.
Well, since we talk...
even the police I spoke with privately, one-on-one. Hey, look, we talk about this in private, after hours. Why don't they just legalize it? Please, your thought.
Well, I was just going to say that since we talked to you 2 weeks ago, I know you've managed to skirt around the outskirts of a hurricane. You've been to the bridge in Selma, Alabama, and on to Montgomery. You've had a rally on the City Hall steps in Chicago. You've been through Baltimore. I don't know if you got close to the neighborhood of the wire or not.
No, we did indeed. It looks like, something in hell, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just wondering if there's anything that particularly stands out in your mind as a high point or a low point of what you've done so far.
There are two that do kind of stand out in that they show the willingness, the courage, the ability of people to stand up to this drug war. One was the first day in San Diego when they opened up the one fence in what they call Freedom Park, and the people in Tijuana were reaching through the fence. They had a bullhorn. They were begging us to stop this madness, crying out for help, telling us that there's nothing they can do. It's up to the United States. And truthfully, the United States does run this drug war on a worldwide basis. Okay. And then the other was when we pulled into El Paso. There were hundreds of people. I couldn't begin to count them. I would guesstimate 500 perhaps. And they had a welcome avenue for the caravanners to walk through, to cheers that you wouldn't believe. Music and dancing and speeches and just a great desire.
And El Paso's actually where you got a responsive action from the city council.
Indeed. There was a situation where one councilman, his name was quite literally Dr. No, who didn't want any mention of changing the drug laws, because he said if we begin to talk about changing the drug laws, the idea of legalization will come up, and I don't want legalization even talked about.
Well,
it's preposterous.
Yeah. We look for.
Can I make a comment about? I've been following some of the stories coming out of the Chronicle about this urine lab, if you will.
Well, before you go any further, let me tell you that sitting right across from me is Lisa Andrews, who's the lawyer that broke this case wide open and brought the mess with the urinalysis to the court's attention. So if you're going to say something about it or ask something, you've got the expert.
Well, first off, Lisa, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this, because the truth be told, that we have in the city of Houston failed in every regard insofar as this drug war. We are one of the world's largest drug distribution hubs. We have our jails sometimes unconstitutionally overcrowded, and the urine lab scandal follows on the heels of the drug testing scandal, which follows on other scandals in the past. And what we've done over the years is just fail in this drug war in every way. And I want to thank you so much for what you did.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Okay, and would you like to tell us where people can find you on the radio, even though you're lost in the wilds of Washington, D.C.?
Well, we're going to be here a couple more days. I'm going to have a couple more shows dealing directly with this Caravan for Peace, and you can tune in on Sunday evenings on KPFT, which is 90.1 FM, starting at 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Okay. And this week we'll have some speeches, and I want to hear what Javier Cecilia's last speech is about, because last night in Baltimore
now,
he was...
Javier Cecilia is the poet who lost a son, yes, and who is the main guiding spirit and organizer behind this, just to bring the people up to date.
I'm proud to say he's become a friend. His English is about as bad as my Spanish, but we had breakfast together today and talked it over. And he's a man of light, if you will. People gather around him and absorb that light, and it reflects back in so many ways. But he's not going to quit. We haven't made the progress he wanted. The media has been there, but it's been Spanish media.
Yeah.
And for the most part. And he's not going to slow down. Neither are these people that have lost their loved ones.
Yeah.
And again, Lisa, I just want to say to you, the scandal is not just 300,000 people this year. It is 30 million people over the last 10 years. And I think every one of those sent to prison for a bad drug test or jail time in Houston deserve some sort of recompense or their freedom. And please keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dean, and be safe. If you're in D.C., you're in the most dangerous part of your journey, and we look forward to getting together with you when you're back in Houston. So, thank you.
Buford. When we approached the White House, I pointed out that is the heart of Mordor.
Okay.
Hey, Dean, stop over when you get home.
Okay.
I will, my friend. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this info. And again, Sunday night, KPFT, 6:30 p.m., 90.1 FM.
Okay, thank you. Looks like time's about to slip away, and I wanted to get to the other big issue. This was the one that hit the paper this morning, and this was about the court's refusal to use personal recognizance bonds and the fact that our county jail, which is still problematic with the number of people in it, 2/3 of the inmates are pretrial detainees who have not made bail. And let me start out my question to you with a preface. More years ago than I care to think about, when I first started practicing in good old Lubbock, which is about as conservative a place as you can ever find, on nonviolent misdemeanors, which would include things like hot checks, shoplifting, minor possession of marijuana, the judges routinely and automatically gave personal recognizance bonds, meaning they didn't have to put up any money or property to begin with, to any defendant who had a house or apartment in the county, who had a job or was full-time student in some institution, who was not already out on bond for some other offense, and who had a family member that lived in the county. I mean, that was just automatic. In fact, it even went to the point where if someone were arrested on a misdemeanor charge, the lawyer could go down to the jail that night, sign him out to a release to the lawyer's custody. The guy would not spend a night in jail. He would have to appear in court the next morning to have bond set and enter a plea. But why in the world don't the courts here use personal recognizance? It would save millions and millions of dollars of public money as well as the people it hurts.
Probably the better people to answer that question are our judges.
Try getting them to appear on a show like this.
Right. However, I can tell you, I guess, what those of us in the courthouse usually say about that is because it's much harder to get people to plead guilty when they're on bond and when they're on PR bonds.
Well, if you're facing a maximum 6-month sentence and you've already been in jail 5.5 months with no bond, it becomes a pretty easy answer to plead and walk out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the real reason for that, everybody's got to do a bond. Judges have to be reelected every 2 years. Where the hell are they going to get the money if they don't get it from these bondsmen? These are the guys that they're employing because they're having a bond for everybody. And you better be nice to my reelection campaign, or I might start calling your bonds due. Does that have anything to do with it?
I don't know. I don't get involved in that.
Those allegations have been floating around ever since I've been in Houston. But the problem is, if anything like that's going on, it either happens with a wink and a nod so that nothing's ever said, or it's in private backroom meetings, so there's no way of knowing. But there's no doubt about it that the bail bond business is a very big and very profitable business, and there's no doubt that the bondsmen do make political contributions. Let's take another quick break, and then we'll wrap it up.
Do you suffer from fear of losing your election? Are you terrified that voters will discover you've done nothing to improve their lives? Maybe it's time you talk to your spin doctor about Incarcerex. In clinical anxieties by making voters think you're doing something about the drug problem. It's simplistic and fast-acting. If your problems continue or get worse, you can always double or triple your dose of Incarcerex. Whether it's addiction, therapeutic use, or just casual use, there's an Incarcerex plan for every American. Best of all, taxpayers, not you, will foot the bill. So talk to your spin doctor. Side effects include loss of civil liberties, police corruption, racial injustice, increased terrorism, threat of HIV and AIDS, and violent crime. Bloated prisons are also a common side effect. Stop taking Incarcerex if bloating lasts longer than 20 years. If you're trying to balance the budget, keep families together, or protect human rights, Incarcerex may not be right for you. Do not mix Incarcerex with the Constitution or common sense. So start taking Incarcerex and keep pretending you're doing something about the drug problem.
Politics on Houston Media Source.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics with our guest, Lisa Andrews. One thing that has been kind of troubling me as I've followed the stories about this probation drug testing is I just really don't see how requiring urinalyses of probationers, and especially of pretrial people, adds anything at all to public safety. I mean, even if that probationer occasionally smokes a joint or even smokes a rock of crack on occasion, that's not really going to cause any problems to the public. It's not going to cause an outbreak of crime on his part. Now, if he's doing enough of it so that there are some behavioral changes, yeah, the probation officer should be able to see that. If he actually commits another crime, yeah, we can catch that. But to me, I just don't see the point, especially of urine testing for marijuana. It just, if you're simply looking for an excuse to trip the guy up and send him back to prison on a technicality, that's fine. But in terms of any kind of supervision of what he's doing while he's on probation, I can't see where using the urine test really adds to the quality of the probation at all. It looks to me like it's, first, a massive waste of taxpayer money, and second, it's unnecessary and needless harassment of the individuals concerned. And as you pointed out, it seems to have developed a system that is just totally irresponsible in the way it's carried out. And this, as I say, is just my 2 cents worth as an advisor on the sideline, but it looks to me like this is one of those cases where, especially those people out there that keep yelling for smaller government, ought to look around and see if we can't cut out some of these big government urinalyses and make things better for us. So before we run out of time, is there anything in particular that you'd like to say? Or
Well, I do appreciate y'all having me on, and programs like this which continue to highlight these problems, because just from a practitioner standpoint, when you have clients that are wrongly accused and you find out that is the case, I think everyone suffers, because at the end of the day, you want your system to have integrity and you want to be able to rely on the evidence that's presented in court. But what it seems we're finding more and more often, whether it be the DNA lab 10 years ago, the bat van situation, or now this, it's starting to make people wonder, can you rely on anything that law enforcement or the courts put forth? Yeah. And it affects everyone.
And if people don't trust the courts, the whole government's in trouble.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that was the most concerning thing about this, is how pervasive this problem was, how many people knew about this problem and did nothing about it, and were content to let these errors continue to be made on a daily basis, affecting people's freedom.
Clayton, you want to chip in anything before we go?
The only thing I really need to say is for everybody to try to keep the pressure on our representatives to do what we want them to do. Sit down, write the letter, and put it in the snail mail.
Okay. And he says snail mail because pretty much most studies have shown that that's what really gets elected representatives' attention. Those are the ones they go back and look at before they go to debates or vote on the floor. And to say one other thing before we close tonight, there's only one private profession that's mentioned anywhere in the U.S. Constitution. And the Bill of Rights guarantees to everyone the right to assistance of counsel. The only job in this country enshrined in the Constitution and held by the framers to be important to all of us is the criminal defense lawyer. They're the ones whose job it is to make sure that the rest of the government plays by its own rules. And I think we have with us tonight a fine example of the way that a criminal defense lawyer, or to use the phrase preferred by some of my colleagues who were in that, a lawyer representing citizens charged with crimes. Lisa, you're a fine example of what a lawyer really should be.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I think we all owe you a gift of thanks.
You're a rock star in my book.
Thank you.
What's next? Of course, that's
We'll
hard
see.
to guess because,
We'll see.
like most lawyers, what's next is who walks in the door tomorrow.
That's right. That's right.
That's part of what makes the job fun, though,
Exactly.
isn't it?
Something new every day.
I understand you started out in the district attorney's office for a few years, and why the move to private practice?
I had been there almost 13 years.
You're a long-term, hard-nosed prosecutor, then.
I sure was. And I am as zealous an advocate on this side as I was a prosecutor. You know, I think more 3 kids later and many, many trials on that side later, I decided I was ready for a change. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years.
Okay. Enjoying it?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I had, once upon a time, a grand theory. As I sat in the law school and watched people go through their law careers, it was my impression that large numbers of defense lawyers served their apprenticeship, as it were, by doing 2 or 3 years in the prosecutor's office. And it's a great way to learn trial work. But as time went on, I started thinking about a really radical idea. And finally, I came to the conclusion that that's working things backwards. That if I were boss, what I would do is require anyone accepting a job in the prosecutor's office to have spent a minimum of 2 years as a public defender first. And let me give you my reason for it. The important thing that would do, it would be to teach them that that guy on the other side of the table is a human being, not simply a number to add to their conviction record. Am I totally off base here?
Not at all. In fact, you know, many times it's not because of any malicious intent or anything like that, but as a prosecutor, you don't have an opportunity to visit with the criminal defendant. They're represented.
Yeah.
They don't speak to you. You review a file.
Yeah. And
it does become somewhat impersonal. And I have definitely have a different perspective on this side because of that exact, these people have families, they're people.
And that brings something else up. We talk sometimes about the effect on someone who's sent to prison. One thing that is almost always overlooked is the effect on that person's family when he's sent to prison. Some of the stories I've heard about children whose parents were convicted and sent off are really just heartbreaking and appalling.
They are. They really are.
So we're just about at the end of another night. I want to tell you that this has been a very exciting and thrilling broadcast for me. It's not often that we really get to delve into not only a current problem, but to someone who has managed on her own initiative to do something about at least starting us on the road to a solution to it. So probably 2 weeks from tonight, we'll maybe have some more to say about the upcoming November elections. They could be pretty crucial to the drug laws in several states, may have some effect at the federal level as well. I suspect there will probably be some more developments on the urinalysis story in the next couple of weeks. We'll hear from Dean. So it's going to be a busy couple of weeks, and we hope to see you as soon as we get back. Good night, and thank you.
Thank you.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories in you.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. You end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.